My name is Melissa Trimmer. I'm the Corporate Executive Chef here at the Dawn Foods Innovation Studio. Today we're going to make an autumn wreath cake. The key with this cake is to start with the flowers and freeze them. So that's where we'll be starting today. I've made all my colors with Dawn White Buttercream and colored them with Chef Master colors. To get those pretty fall hues, we need to dim those pigments back just a touch. So anything with a cool tone, like a blue or a gray, will be toned down by a little bit of black. Anything with a brighter tone, like an orange or a pink or a red, will have a touch of brown added. In this way, the cake will feel very seasonal. To have a steady hand for piping, I'm going to sit down. It's the best job in the bake shop. You get to sit. Let's start with pine cones. You'll notice that I have a quarter sheet tray here to place the finished flowers on. Some parchment papers, also for the flowers. And I've divided my bags here by type of flower. You can see today we're doing several. I'm going to start with a chocolate pine cone. This is made using Dawn chocolate buttercream. I'm using a flat straight tip to pipe it just a little bit on the nail to hold it down. Next, we'll do kind of a swirl design up. My next two tips are both chrysanthemum tips. One is slightly larger, one is slightly smaller. I'm going to place each petal in, one at a time, spinning around and pulling directly out. Once I get one row down, I will do another row, trying to make sure the next pieces cover the other ones entirely. I'm going to switch after the bottom two rows to the smaller tip. Now I'm going to continue putting those little kind of pine cone petals in. If you're making a larger pine cone, you can certainly do more than 2 rows at the bottom. So it just depends on how large you want to make it. Our chocolate buttercream is a great consistency for piping. I'm going to continue working around in a circle until I get to the top. And when I get to the top, I'll kind of curve the petals around each other. And here we go. And there's the pine cone. So when it's finished, we'll put it right here on this board. Next, we'll do a poinsettia, but to make this one more fall themed, we're going to use white leaves and a dark blue center. So again, we'll start with a smaller nail and a smaller piece of paper, and we'll put a little buttercream on just to hold it. With the larger leaf tip, I'm gonna pipe a little ring around the outside. This is something to hold your leaves in. Now we're going to pipe 5 leaves. With a smaller leaf tip, I'm going to pipe some inner leaves. Same thing, 5, going right in between where the large leaves ended up. You can overlap them slightly, that's just fine. And we'll finish up the blue grass tip right in the middle. And that's it, a poinsettia. Next, we're going to move into our dogwood flowers. These ones are usually a white 5-petaled flower. To make it a little more special, we're going to tip it with a little bit of this blue. This is the same blue that we're going to ice the cake in. We're using a curved rose tip, and we're going to use a grass tip with that same blue. So we'll put a little dollop on the nail and on one of the smaller papers. First, we're going to do a circle to do the base of our flower. And now we're going to create petals by tipping the wrist and bringing it all the way out and in. We'll create 5 petals like that. The final petal will try to tuck underneath the original one. So let's give it a shot. Just 5 petals. So we're going to go 1, slightly overlapping, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we'll finish up with the grass tip in the middle. My next 3 decorations are larger flowers. So I've swapped out my little nail for a large nail. Never take finished flowers over other finished flowers, right? If I drop it, I could have a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and move my tray around to continue working so that I preserve all my items. Yeah, so now you notice I've got bigger sheets and orange for pumpkins. So this is a little 1M star tip. And we are going to do a little swirl up the middle. Just something to go around. And now we will simply draw up the sides to make a pumpkin. This is the easiest one we're doing today. You can also do these in all different colors and just do a cake around pumpkins if you don't have a lot of time for design in your shop. I'm gonna use a little star tip, little French tip on the top, and that makes the stem. My next flower is going to be an English rose. This one uses 2 different types of rose tips, and it's another large flower. So I'm going to use a classic tea rose tip with a dark blue, and then a curved rose tip with an orange. Now you could use monochromatic colors if you like, whatever feels right, but in this way it still feels really fall, but you could certainly use the same color with both tips if you like. So we're going to start out the same way we would start out a tea rose. We're going to build that little base with a straight rose tip. Around and around, and we want to give it a good base. And draw it out a little bit. Okay. We're going to do that again on the inside, but as soon as we get one round, we're going to pause. We're going to kind of do squiggles so the inside looks a little bit like a peony. And then we have to do that really careful so the buttercream doesn't fall over. Once that's done, we're going to start laying in leaves. We're going to tip the small side in and go as quickly as we can. And now we have an English rose. So my pan is full, so I'm gonna switch out and start another one. Our last flower will be mauve buttercream flowers. This is actually one of my favorite techniques. I'm not even sure that it has a name. It's not really a flower that occurs in nature, but it's super fun and super pretty, so I can't wait to share it with you. We're gonna use a Korean rose tip, so these really big, kind of half moon shape. And then the second one here is a traditional rose tip. And let's get started. We use the traditional rose tip on the large nail. With a large, and now we're going to just create the bottom disc with the straight rose tip. It's important that you make both because you'll never get a good disc with that big half moon tip. And we're gonna take it around and then around a second time to fill it in. That's really what differentiates it from some of the other designs. Next, we're gonna take this half moon and we're gonna lift it straight up, but around in a circle, so one builds off the next. You can decide when you get to the end if you want to stack this flower or leave it singly. I'll show you both. So this is going to be a stacked flower where I bring it around twice if you want it to be a little bit taller. Feels kind of like flames, feels kind of fun. If you like a little bit cleaner look, we're gonna do the same thing we just did. We're gonna roll in with the rose tip at the bottom. We have to fill it in because we don't have a good base otherwise. And now instead of bringing it around twice, I'm going to bring it around once. The key here is that you want the inside corner to stay at the center of the flower so it has a defined center, just like that. Very similar technique for 2 separate flowers. Our next step is to stack and crumb coat the cake. For this cake, I'm using Dark Devil's Food Baker's Request. As usual, bakes level for less waste, so I don't have to trim the bellies on the cake. We're going to use this 10-inch NJ cake drum. It fits beautifully with an 8-inch cake because it allows room for decorating on each side. The nice part about cake drums is that they're sturdier, so I can make a heavier cake on it. This cake has 3 layers and a beautiful filling, so we just really want this extra support. I'm going to fill the cake with my Dawn seasonal pumpkin cream cheese filling. You might think chocolate pumpkin, but I promise it's delicious. I will be crumb coating this cake in a Dawn chocolate buttercream. The reason I do that is because I want that chocolate to mesh beautifully with my filling. You'll notice later that I ice the cake in blue buttercream. That's okay. What I want is every time someone slices into this cake to make it look appetizing and delicious, and the chocolate buttercream used for stacking and crumb coating will take us there. First, a little buttercream goes down, and then a cake. I'll dam it in with chocolate buttercream. In this way, my filling stays put and my buttercream holds in all the goodness. You'll notice this cake is decorated with a fall theme, and to add to that is our fall seasonal filling, pumpkin cream cheese filling. It's super delicious. It's like pumpkin cheesecake, but in a filling. Next layer goes on. Before I take it any further, I'm going to continue to dam this in with my chocolate buttercream. This makes sure the filling stays inside where it's supposed to stay. I'll dam it in. Next, I'm going to add our seasonal pumpkin cream cheese filling. And finally, the top layer. To crumb coat, I'm going to go ahead and take the buttercream around the bottom, the top edge, and a little swirl on the top. And we'll ice it in. Notice how I always work with an empty bowl for my scraps? This is really important. We don't work out of the tub. We don't work out of the container that I need to have clean product in. This ensures that I don't have cross-contamination and my cake stays beautiful and crumb-free. Once the buttercream's laid in, I'm going to take off the extra. I'll start by cleaning off the bottom of the board. Level the top. Now it's time for the sides. Now that the cake is stacked and crumb coated, we're going to smooth ice. Before I do that though, I'm going to stop and clean my station. I want to make sure there's no crumbs anywhere for my beautiful smooth icing. To smooth ice, I'm going to use Dawn White Buttercream. Again, we've talked about those Chef Master Gel colors and how it's a little muted blue. To finish off though, I'm going to use a sprinkle blend. I'm using our Autumn Blend Nonpareils, Chocolate Decorettes, and Grande Pearls. Look how pretty that is. Let's smooth ice. First, I'll drop in buttercream on the top, then I'll lay in the sides after. I'm going to put on more buttercream than I need so that I have enough to scrape off and make it nice and clean and smooth. To finish smooth icing this cake, I'm going to use a hot spatula. You can call this a spatula or a palette knife, but either way it needs to be warm and then dry. So we'll dip it in, get it nice and hot, dry it off with a clean towel, and level the top of the cake. I'm going to continue this motion while I work on the sides of the cake. Once the sides are in, we're going to lay in the top corners, clean up the bottom, and then we'll pause to decorate. Very, very quickly, as soon as you're done smooth icing, we're going to put the sprinkles on the side of the cake before the shortening sets. So, we're going to kind of move the cake around in our hand. And I've tried to position the sprinkles so most of them fall back in the bowl. You may have a few travelers, that's all right. Just clean your station before moving on. We'll slide this down, give it a little whirl, and then we'll decorate. Now it's time to decorate. In addition to those gorgeous decorations we just made, I've got 3 additional piping bags. Chocolate with a small round tip. I've got a Russian tip, mauve flower just to fill in. And I've got that dark blue and a beak leaf tip also to fill in. We're gonna start with a stick wreath design. So basically I'm just going to take this and bring it around. I am just going to take this around a few times. And what's interesting about decorators is we all kind of tend to do circles in the same way. So after I get a few rounds, I'm going to pause and rotate so that I'm not constantly doing the same circular design. I want this to feel organic and like a stick wreath. And that's how I do that. If your bag has a little pop in it, that's okay. It still feels like a stick and it's okay. It's almost better to have it be just like a little bit natural. There we go. Okay. Now that this is in, we have to decide what the front of the cake is. So we find the prettiest spot. I think maybe here. And then we'll start dropping the flowers in. They're nice and frozen. A little guy. Okay, here's one. Next, we're gonna drop the pumpkin down. You want to keep holding it up like this one. Give it a little support underneath. There she goes. Once the flowers are on, we're going to add filler. So here comes filler. So now what I'm looking for is kind of any major gaps where it looks like we just need a couple of flowers. And this is a nice little Russian tip that I'm using here. I can bring out a few on the ends, wherever you need an extra flower. Once the flowers are in, I'm going to go ahead and drop in leaves. And now this is really where we add beautiful little garnish, but where the filler begins. I chose to make my leaves blue because I didn't want to change the color palette. Sometimes green leaves are awesome and I love them, but for this cake, the green would have detracted from this beautiful color palette that I have going on, and so we wanted to stay in that color palette. And we have a cake. An autumn wreath cake. For more cake inspiration, visit us at dawnfoods.com.